Hello everybody out there, it's me, Mash. We hope that you've been enjoying our Game of the Year content for 2020, and we are right now going to continue with my picks for best and worst games of the year and a couple more things. So when it comes to 2020 in terms of video games, it was a very strange year. I think a lot of us can agree on that, and two things stood out to me first and foremost in my mind. One of those being, do we need this sequel? I felt that way with The Last of Us 2 and Spelunky 2. Now, I'm not saying that they're bad games, but it really felt like they weren't that necessary. To me, they just felt not as important as the originals. And that does have to say, you do have to say right now that those games set some really high bars. So a sequel was going to have a lot to live up to. And again, I feel like Last of Us 2 and Spelunky 2 just didn't live up to the hype. Then, on the flip side, we have Risk of Rain 2, Streets of Rage 4, and Half-Life Alyx. Now that's what I call a sequel. Streets of Rage 4 was a fantastic co-op game. It had an amazing, beautiful, smooth, every other great word under the sun art style that was just a match made in heaven with that series. Risk of Rain 2 was another great co-op game that you could play, and it jumped a fantastic indie game into the 3D space and really knocked it out of the park. Although not truly a sequel, Half-Life Alyx proves us wrong because we had never thought we would see anything from Half-Life again, to the point of memification. And then guess what? We get a Half-Life VR game. Yeah, that happened. 2020 was weird. And all of that was just the tip of the iceberg. There was so much more gaming in 2020 than I think any of us were expecting. Alright, let's get into my MISC awards. The first one is going to be for the best non-2020 game, and that goes to Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. Yes, Bloodstained Curse of the Moon. Because of this game, I got into speedrunning. I got the 3rd place time on the leaderboards. It's been a wild ride. There's a lot of things I could say about this game, but one thing I have to say is that it definitely takes this category for me. I've played a crap ton of this game this year. My favorite retro game that I played this year is Castlevania 3. I played it on the Anthology Anniversary something collection that's available on PSN, and it was something that I've been meaning to scratch off my bucket list because it was one of the Castlevania games that just eluded me for the longest time, and I finally was able to beat it, so I'm able to scratch that off my bucket list. My favorite character in a video game goes to Hachi the Corgi. I honestly couldn't think of anything too spectacular outside of this, but you know, for this category, I think you got to think a little bit outside of the box. You can't just say like, oh, Axel from Streets of Rage 4, because I love that game. He's a great protagonist. But the weirdest, but most interesting and best use of like just an out there idea for a character goes to Hachi the Corgi. He's a corgi inside of a tank that's also a train, and it's just cool. Corgi mech train action. Alright, now let's get into my shoutouts. These are for games that I had meant to play, but throughout the year, you know, I try to play as many games as I can, and we just were not able to get to all of them. First one goes to Skater XL. Skater XL is another skate type game. We actually had a couple of these kind of games to look out for, but I was not able to get around to it. I just dropped off my radar, but from what I had seen of other people's playthroughs of it, it looks like it's a solid skate type game, and I'm definitely looking forward to checking it out eventually. And I also have to shout out to Hades. Hades is a game that a lot of people recommended to me. It started with my friend Chino. He was saying, you should play Hades, you should play Hades. And then everybody was like, play Hades, play Hades. It definitely looks like it's my cup of tea. I love Supergiant games. I love Bastion. I love Transistor. But the thing is, I just kind of, when it came out, I was busy with other stuff, and you know how that goes. So unfortunately, I did not play Hades. And please don't hate me for not including it in my Game of the Year picks. And I also really wanted to play this year a couple of other games: Journey to the Savage Planet, Yakuza Like a Dragon, SpongeBob Battle for Bikini Bottom, and Black Mesa. Because that's right, technically we got 2 Half-Life games this year. We got 2 Half-Life games this year. What is going on? Alright, this next one is going to come as a surprise to a lot of you guys. We have my worst game of the year. It is that time. Guys, my worst game of the year goes to Wasteland 3. If you paid attention to our YouTube channel and some of the videos that we came up with, I did a quick scope on Wasteland 3 where I went in depth on everything that was wrong with this game, and my entire experience about just, I was excited, I was super hyped. You could see me in the old PAX East videos that we did talking about, yo, Wasteland 3, I played it at PAX, it was so good, it's gonna be my game of the year. Well, unfortunately, yet again, I have to come here and I have to say to you guys, a game I was really looking forward to, absolutely disappointed to me. The difference being, though, unlike last time, this game actually has a lot of potential, and I think it could be a very solid, very good game. Maybe I could even retroactively go back and say it's my favorite game of the year, but after a certain amount of fixes, because it is clear as day with Wasteland 3 there was an insanely rushed development cycle. We got a lot of that this year. There are plenty of games where that was the case, but with Wasteland 3 there were bugs all over the place. There was crashing report and all that kind of stuff. Everything else was great though. The music, the story, I was getting really into it. The gameplay was phenomenal. The graphics looked really good. But none of that works when the game is buggy as hell. And now some of you may be thinking, well, what about Cyberpunk? Cyberpunk was a giant shitstorm. That is true. I'm not denying that Cyberpunk was very disappointing as well. The thing is, I got to play Cyberpunk, and guess what? I played it fine. It had issues, of course. I'm not denying that there were no issues, but it wasn't to the point that the game was broken, that I could not engage in playing the game. The gameplay was not as buggy as Wasteland 3's gameplay was, because in Wasteland 3, basic actions were bugged. Things were popping up that didn't make any sense, that was contradicting what I was actually saying, and it was just a crap ton of bugs that were preventing me from being able to play the game. What's the most important part of a game? As they say, being able to play the game. Well, if you can't play the game, it's too buggy, it's broken. And I was fine playing Cyberpunk. I was not fine playing Wasteland 3. At some point, I just had to stop, and that was really disappointing for me this year. Yo, we get the rants. And speaking of Cyberpunk, let's get to my honorable mentions. So before we get to the game of the year, there's a list of games that I felt were very strong contenders for my game of the year pick, but unfortunately just didn't quite make the cut for one reason or another, so let's get into that. First off, we have Kakarot. Many of you may have forgotten about this game because it came out all the way back in like January or February. I thought it did a great job of putting the DBZ anime into an adventure game, and Bandai, if you ever have the urge to do this type of thing again, do it with Gundam. I would love to see this with the original, at least. You know, my preference would be for Gundam Wing, but original G Gundam, a G Gundam game in the style of Kakarot, or any Gundam game in the style of Kakarot, is a great idea, because Kakarot was good. Next, we have Rainy City Pandemic. Rainy City Pandemic is a game that we found out about through Play NYC, and we did a little bit of a video on it. We described it as Papers, Please, but with 2020, and that kind of stands. It definitely felt like that. Although it's a very small package, I really liked it. I would love to see more from this team. I absolutely love watching indie studios get very creative with what kind of ideas you could put into a video game, because, you know, who knows what else they could make. You're not going to see that in the AAA. That's always where the indie games are going to be way better than AAA games, because they're just going to think outside the box. I also like to give an honorable mention to Sucker Punch's Ghost of Tsushima. I put that one down shortly after picking it up, and unfortunately never really came back to it. I did like it, at the risk of saying it's like Dark Souls, but I don't normally play that type of game. I don't play a type of game where the idea is that it's going to be really difficult and you have to focus on parries, rolls, conserving health, and what kind of attacks you're doing, like what attack you're doing, the right moment to attack back at the enemy. That's usually not my cup of tea, but hey, I could get into it. Ghost of Tsushima was beautiful, and I like that a AAA developer is going to make a game about Japanese history. Granted, I mean, it's fiction, but you know, it's going to take that as the theme of the game. I think that was really cool. I think Ghost of Tsushima is one of the coolest games that came out this year. From conception to the fact that it was by Sucker Punch, I just didn't really get to sink my teeth into too much. I do plan to change that though. I really want to go back to that game. Another indie game, we got Evans Remains. This is something that we also kind of covered on our channel a while back. It is an indie game, very minimal gameplay, but has beautiful art and aesthetic to it. The atmosphere is to die for in that game, but I can't really nominate it because there just wasn't so much to do. It didn't feel like a game of the year game, but if maybe it was a little bit more fleshed out on the gameplay side, I definitely would have given it to it. That being said, just because it has minimal gameplay does not mean it's not a great game, and I definitely recommend you check it out. Evans Remains. We had Yeast Memories of Calcutta. This is one of the games I was really looking forward to this year. Unfortunately, it's just a re-release. I think we basically had the exact same version of this game on Steam, so there wasn't anything to write home about this game particularly. But yeah, I mean, I love Memories of Calcutta. It's the game that got me into my favorite JRPG franchise, so some part of me wanted to give this game my game of the year, but I did have to hold back on it. I recommend you guys check it out if you haven't already. It's a great game to get into if you're not familiar with the series. Again, that's kind of what happened with me. So, sorry guys, but not going to be game of the year for me this year. Wink. What could I be referencing? The next game is also kind of a late entry. I think this was released back in like September or something, but we have The Art of Rally. I'm sure many of you haven't heard of this game. It is an indie rally racing game by the same people that made Absolute Drift, and that was also a really fun game. I didn't really get to spend too much time with this, so I can't nominate it too much further, but I definitely recommend checking out. It's super interesting. If you play the game for more than 5 minutes and like pay attention to what they're telling you and some of the text and stuff, you'll realize that this is kind of like a love letter to the history of rally racing, which I was not expecting. Also, there seems to be a lot of replay value because there is a ton of collectibles just driving around in free roam, picking up with your car. So I definitely recommend checking out Art of Rally. I thought it was really cool. Another game that I was not able to finish that I kind of started and I put down was Trials of Mana. Now, I've never played the Mana series. I will say it's very familiar to me because it plays a lot like a Yeast game, and I thought the remake was perfect because the original game came from like the SNES. That's why, again, I nominated it for my favorite remake of the year, because it's just such a jump. If you look at the original Trials of Mana to the Trials of Mana remake, definitely going to go back to that one. I highly recommend it. And also, like I said, Cyberpunk. I definitely want to give an honorable mention to Cyberpunk. I would say if you're having problems with that game, don't play it on consoles. Well, now you can't, because they, at least on Sony's platform, because they made people they force refunded the PS4 version of the game. So you can't actually do that. That is crazy. I know, I understand. And it's crazy to be putting it in my honorable mention. But I actually really liked what was there. It was not the game that I was expecting, but, you know, and it also could just be my bias because I really like CD Projekt Red. But like, legitimately, I didn't have that many problems. I don't have an amazing PC, but I have a good PC. I played it mostly fine. I had encountered a really bad bug earlier, like visually speaking, and I just Googled it real quick. They just said, hey, yeah, update your driver. So I updated my driver, and guess what? The bug was gone. And there were still other small bugs here and there, but it was pretty playable for me. We'll see though, you know, if I'm like 10 hours in, maybe there's something later on down the road. I don't want to say anything yet, but I have enjoyed it and I like what's there. Kind of like with Wasteland, I like what's there that works. It's just that, again, with Wasteland, whatever. You guys heard that rant before. Cyberpunk gets an honorable mention. I can't wait to retroactively go back and say this game is amazing 6 months from now when they fix everything, but definitely an interesting game nonetheless. Alright, so this year I'm going to structure things a little bit different from my solo because I really didn't feel like I had a strong winner. There were tons of great games that I got to play. That's kind of what I fell back on, but there didn't feel like there was a definitive best of game. There were a lot of games where I wasn't aware of them until just about when they released, and then I got them and I played them and I loved them. I just ended up kind of feeling when I was coming down to think, all right, what's my game of the year for 2020? It felt like I was picking names out of the hat, and it pisses me off, and maybe it pisses you off, but that's how we're going to do it. People love top fives, right? Top fives are all the rage. My favorite game critic does top 5 reviews for his end of the year content. So yeah, that's what we're gonna do. This is a tribute to my favorite video game critic and not me being indecisive as all hell about 2020. I felt like part of the reason why I had such a difficulty picking a game for my game of the year is the fact that a lot of the games I was anticipating most had to be pushed back, or they came out and they were very buggy. They're like rushed development and it was hard to play them, so it just didn't leave me with a whole lot of options. But listen, I always said this, I say this all the time, I say this 100 times, I'll say it one more time, but if the AAA game industry fails you, you can always fall back on good old indie games, because indie games will always be there, and you can play a bunch of great stuff like Rainy City Pandemic, like Evans Remains, like so many of the other games, like some of the games that you're about to see on my top 5. So let's do this. So let's start. Number 5, Streets of Rage 4. Streets of Rage 4 was a great game. I got to play it online with my friend Joe. I've been playing it offline in my spare time. The animation is so fluid. That's, I think, the first thing that most people will notice about Streets of Rage 4 is how fluid the animation is. The art style just looks like you're watching somebody's sketched paintings, and it all blends together so well. It's nice. It's just visually very pleasing to look at. The soundtrack is pretty good. I definitely enjoyed a lot of the throwbacks that they did. Like, you could go back and play some pixely levels. You can play the entire game as a pixely Axel if you like. It's very cool. It's a very neat thing, and I think when they announced Streets of Rage 4, a lot of us had our minds blown, and I think a lot of us are gonna put this game on our Game of the Year picks and lists and all that stuff, and that's for good reason, because this was a great game. It kicks a lot of ass. Definitely one of the best beat-em-ups that ever came out, in my opinion. All right, so number 4 is gonna go to Superliminal. Once again, this is a game that we got to play together for the TooStupidGamerz not too long ago when we were demoing it. I found out about this because of the games of play that happened back in like May, and you know what? I love this game. It was awesome. I streamed it all the way through. Even though it's a pretty short game, it gets marks specifically for how good the gameplay is, how fun it is to solve the puzzles, and how unique and creative it is. Because Superliminal takes a concept that is very familiar to us thanks to games like Portal and Stanley Parable, but it does it with its own twist. And that twist is that the perspective is usually the answer to the puzzle. So you step away and you realize things are not as they appear. It is a great game. I wish it was longer, because I would love to just play more puzzles of that. If they make a Superliminal 2, I'm buying that day 1. For number 3, I'm gonna have to talk about Risk of Rain 2. Risk of Rain 2, my god, what a fun game. A great way to spend an evening with some of your friends over Discord. Risk of Rain 2 is a roguelike that took what they did in the first game and they said, you know what, we're gonna make it 3D now. It's gonna be way more open. There's gonna be way more stuff that you could do. I wish that I could go back in time and force myself to prioritize this game higher on my list, because I remember when it came out, it wasn't on my radar. Like I said before, a lot of these games were like that, and all of a sudden it was out and I thought, oh, that sounds cool, I should go get that. Okay, I'm just gonna do something else, and I totally forgot about it until maybe a month ago, and I've been playing it like crazy since. I've been playing it with some of our buddies. You can check it out on our Discord. We do game nights for that on Fridays sometimes. But yeah, it's been a lot of fun. It feels like a really good sequel. It has a great multiplayer component to it, something that I felt that a lot of roguelikes that I play usually lack. And speaking of other roguelikes, talking about Spelunky 2 again for a second, if I may, that game kind of felt like it was a remix, and half the time I was playing it, all these changes that they made, I just wasn't digging it. There's all these things they did with new enemy types that I was not meshing with at all. Whereas with my number 3, Risk of Rain 2, everything that they did with this game is awesome and blows the first game away, to the point that I don't even really want to play. I liked Risk of Rain 1. I thought it was great, but I don't think I'm ever going to need to play it again because of what they did with 2. So Risk of Rain 2 should be a game of the year for a lot of people, I think, but Risk of Rain 2 it's not a jump forward, it is a leap forward. They did a great job bringing a sequel to an awesome video game roguelike. Can't recommend it enough. The next game on this list is, if you've been watching me stream for the past year, you will not be surprised that it's definitely on here, at least in my top 5. But number 2 is going to be for Rune Factory 4 Special Edition. I've been a fan of the Harvest Moon series since day 1, and bringing in JRPG, dungeon crawling elements, and anime story into Harvest Moon, I think, in my opinion, has perfected the formula. So much so that it feels like I can't go back to regular old Harvest Moon, regular stories of season, because it just doesn't compare anymore. Rune Factory just killed Harvest Moon for me because it's so good. It is such a perfect blend of a bunch of different things to do. Now, that being said, at the very beginning when I was playing this game, I was ecstatic. Every single time I fired it up, I was hyped. I was digging all the crop stuff, meeting all the characters, doing these things, crawling those dungeons, doing that, all this kind of stuff. It was great. But the thing is, now, after having put probably over like 70 hours, over 70 for sure, let's say, over 70 hours later, I feel very hesitant, let's say, to pick up that game again. And that is because those games are so bloated with content. It feels like you need a flowchart to guide you when you come back to playing in this game. Those games are stressful. There's so much that you have to do. There's so many things that you have to keep in mind. There's like no such thing as playing a Rune Factory and just having a casual chill experience. To me, it is work. I need to do this. I need to work on that. I gotta build this farm up. There's just a lot of moving parts. And when you haven't played it for a week, for months, years, it's incredibly difficult to just randomly out of the blue pick it up and start playing it again. It's so bloated. And you know what? I didn't need video games to remind me that I have commitment issues. But playing this game, the idea of right now picking up this game and playing it, to me, feels like I'm going to be signing a 25-year binding contract that I'm going to have to live for the rest of my life in. It's just obnoxious. That being said, though, it is a really fun game. If you've never played Harvest Moon, I recommend it. If you've never played Rune Factory, I recommend... Actually, if you've never played Harvest Moon, I would recommend playing that first and then playing Rune Factory. As I said, it kind of makes that series kind of moot. This port of a 3DS game to the Nintendo Switch deserves a lot of praise, and you can lose tons of hours. Believe me, I have done that. Ask my stream. And for the #1 game, we are going to go with Cloudpunk. That's right, Cloudpunk. Cloudpunk is a cyberpunk sandbox indie game that is set in a futuristic world where you have to play as a delivery driver for CorpSec. I know, not very creative on the name, but hear me out. This is a really cool game. I invested quite a bit of time going out of my way to play through this game just so I could get through the rest of it. Now, the story is not amazing, especially not the plot resolution, in my opinion. Certainly nothing groundbreaking. The resolution of the game pitted me with a moral choice that by the point that I got into the game, I had a little bit, to be fair, kind of tuned out with the story, and also wasn't too clear on a lot of things that I felt like I couldn't really make a decision. Based on what the game was giving me, the info that the game was providing me with, I don't think that they set up that moral choice very well, to the point that I basically just kind of went with a pacifist route, because that's usually where I go. That's usually the decision that I choose if I don't know what to do in a situation like that in a game. But yeah, I felt like they could have informed us a little bit better, or more so, maybe the wording I'm thinking of is give the player a reason to care more. The last act of the game felt pretty rushed with regards to the story of a character named Cora, that I just found it hard to really keep up with all the information that was given to me and invest. And it was a hard choice for me to make, because I didn't really know what I was doing. I felt like I was just given a multiple choice test to on a topic I have no idea on. And that was kind of disappointing, because I was looking forward to where the story was going. Now, that being said, Nanners, why is this your #1? The story aside, the characters and the world are awesome. I absolutely love all the characters in this game. They're really fun and quirky. They have very unique and memorable identities of their own. I also like the back and forth between the duo of the protagonist, Rania, and her companion, Camus. So Companion plays this role of kind of like a AI that is basically kind of acts like as if a dog was talking. And then Rania has this more parental, guiding tone. And they banter, they bicker, they talk about everything in the game. There's a lot of talking in this game. If you don't like a lot of talking in your game, it may not be for you, but I really enjoyed just the constant back and forth. That's what kept bringing me back. Then it wasn't just those two. The dispatcher was a really cool guy. A lot of the clients that you pick up, and just walking around in the world, you run into so many different faces. There were a lot of characters that you would walk up to in this game, and they would give you their life story, even though it wasn't pertinent to the rest of the game. There was no quest attached to it, nothing. You were just kind of finding out more about about this world and about this random character that you happen to meet up on the street. And at the end of the interaction, Rania just says, okay, well, good luck with that. I hope you feel better. And that you never see that character again later. I thought that was kind of interesting. But yeah, I mean, I liked walking around. What sold me on this game was just being in Nivalis. It was such a fun place. The atmosphere in this game is so immersive, is so done well. They have a beautiful, I believe it's called voxel art style as well, where it kind of looks like some of the characters are basically just Minecraft or something, but at the same time there's a lot of real world textures like the rain and the skybox and all that kind of stuff. Actually, speaking of the skybox, I liked looking up at the sky in this game, and it just kind of gave me a feeling of Reboot. It felt like I was in Reboot sometimes, and that was awesome. Now, unfortunately, the gameplay is very minimal, which once again, if that's not your cup of tea, if you're looking for a little bit more action, maybe this doesn't do it for you. But like I said, I was able to look past that because the characters in the world was so well done. It was so well fleshed out and enticing to me. It was something that I wanted to put more time into this game, just to explore more, just keep going forward, that I could forgive plot resolution that wasn't so good, or gameplay that was very minimal and maybe even tedious at times. I can't overstate this enough, but getting lost in Nivalis made playing this game worth every second that I invested my time into it. And you know what? I would even say that at some times it hit notes that rang similar to Jazzpunk. And man, if you've never played Jazzpunk, you gotta go play it. That game is great too. But yeah, for 2020, I would say Cloudpunk is gonna be my favorite game of the year. And when I weigh all the different options to, across all these top 5 games, it goes to Cloudpunk. Definitely go check it out. Good job, guys. Alright guys, well thank you for watching. I greatly appreciate your time. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any opinions on my opinions, put those opinions in the comment section below. Don't forget to give us a subscribe and like this video as well. All that good YouTube stuff. Thank you for being with us for the TooStupidGamerz Game of the Year content. I'm looking forward to 2021. There's already been some really cool stuff. That's going to be a crazy Game of the Year video, I believe. And yeah, stick around because we got more TooStupidGamerz videos for you all to check out. So thank you, and we'll see you on the next one.